Beneath the cursed ground, the desert was silent. The wind blew softly over the red sand, whispering like ghosts in the night. Davin, a human explorer, stood at the edge of the cursed land. Locals called it the Whispering Sand. They said, anyone who entered it never came back. Davin didn't believe in curses. He adjusted his helmet and stepped forward. His boots sank slightly into the warm, loose sand. The sky above was orange and fading into dark. He had one mission: to scan old alien ruins buried deep in the dunes. But something else called to him. A sound. He froze. At first he thought it was the wind, but then he heard it again. A weak, broken sound. Like crying. Like someone whispering. He turned on his scanner. No signs of life. But the sound came again, clearer this time. It was a soft voice, muffled, almost lost. Help. Davin's heart skipped a beat. He moved toward the sound, brushing away loose sand. The crying was coming from below. He dropped to his knees and started digging with his hands. The sand was dry and thick, falling back in on itself, but he didn't stop. Something was under there, someone. He found cloth. His fingers trembled as he cleared more. A piece of thin fabric torn and wrapped around something soft. A body. Oh no, Davin whispered. He dug faster, desperate now. A small hand appeared, greenish-blue and shaking. The skin was covered in strange black lines. Not natural lines. Symbols. Marks burned into her skin. A face came next. Young, alien, and still. Her skin was pale. Her lips barely moved. Help. She was alive. Davin pulled her out, careful not to hurt her. She was light, too light, like she hadn't eaten in days. Her chest moved, weak and slow. She had been buried alive, left to die. He looked around. No one was nearby. No one had followed him. He took a deep breath, picked her up gently, and ran toward his small ship. Inside, he placed her on the medbed. Machines beeped. She was breathing, but just barely. Her eyes flickered open, alien, bright, full of fear. She tried to move, but her body was weak. She whimpered and shook her head. It's okay, Davin said softly. You're safe now. She didn't understand his words, but she stared into his eyes. Her lips moved. One word escaped. No. Gods. Davin frowned. What gods? What had they done to her? He scanned her body. Symbols were burned across her back and arms. Ritual markings. Sacrifice. Davin sat beside her, trying to stay calm. This was no accident. She had been placed there on purpose. Someone, or something, had wanted her to die slowly under the sand, and she was just a girl. Hours passed. The girl rested, her breathing steady now. Davin watched her sleep. She couldn't have been more than 15 in human years. Her clothes were old and torn. Her wrists showed signs of ropes. She had been tied up before being buried. He checked the village records again. Locals believed in an ancient being that lived beneath the desert. Every year, they gave a sacrifice. No one talked about it openly. Maybe this girl was the latest. Davin's hands clenched into fists. How could anyone do this? She moved in her sleep and whispered something in her language. It sounded like pain, like fear. He reached out and held her hand. She held on tight, even while sleeping. That moment changed everything for Davin. He had come here for research, for discovery. Now, he had found something else, something worth protecting. Outside, the wind howled louder. The sand moved strangely, as if something under the earth had shifted. The desert was not silent anymore. Something knew the girl had been taken. Something was waking up, and it was angry. The cold body in the sand. Davin sat quietly inside his ship, watching the strange girl sleep. The soft light of the medbay flickered as machines monitored her body. Her skin was cold. Too cold. He had wrapped her in blankets, adjusted the heat, even gave her water, but her body still felt like ice, and the strange symbols on her back had started to glow softly. He didn't know her name, didn't know what species she was. All he knew was she had been buried alive, and she wasn't supposed to survive. He opened his data logs and began recording. Day 1. Unknown alien. Female found buried in whispering sand, breathing weak, skin cold, burn markings possibly ritualistic. She said, "No gods. Possible sacrificial victim." The girl stirred, her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly now. They were a bright violet color, almost unnatural. She looked around in confusion, panic flashing across her face. Davin stood slowly, hands open. "It's okay. You're safe. I won't hurt you." She backed up on the bed, shaking. Then she looked down at her arms. The black marks on her skin were still there, and glowing brighter. Suddenly her eyes widened in fear. She pointed at the marks and screamed. Davin stepped closer. "Wait. What's happening?" She grabbed his arm, whispered something in her language, and then collapsed again. Her body shook violently, and the medbed alarm started beeping. Davin rushed to inject a stabilizer. Her body calmed, but the marks still pulsed with light, as if alive. Something was wrong. Later that night, Davin stepped out of the ship. The wind had died. The stars above were bright and silent, but the ground felt wrong. Every few minutes, a small tremor moved through the sand, as if something below was breathing. He looked back toward the whispering sand, the cursed land. It stretched for miles. He remembered how easily her body had been buried, as if the ground wanted to swallow her. He thought about her words again. No, gods. What kind of people buried a child and called it holy? He tapped his comm link. "Base command, this is Explorer Davin. I need urgent access to ancient village records near Sector C12. Local traditions, sacrificial history, anything you can get." The reply was short. "Why? What did you find?" Davin stared into the eye. Darkness. Something that was never meant to be found again. The next morning the girl was awake again, but she didn't speak. She sat quietly, eyes wide, as if listening to something Davin couldn't hear. She flinched at sudden noises. She refused to touch the food, only sniffed it like an animal. Davin sat across from her with a translator pad, trying to speak in simple, alien dialects. He pointed to himself. "Davin. Me. Davin." Then pointed to her. "You? What's your name?" She looked at him, then looked away. He tried again, slowly. "You. Name?" After a long pause, she tapped her chest. "Valia." Davin smiled gently. "Valia. Okay, you're safe now, Valia." But she didn't smile back. She pointed to the door. Then she touched the glowing marks on her arm and shook her head. "No safe," she whispered. Davin searched old records for hours. Finally, he found something, a story, not written but passed through whispers. Once every decade, the desert god stirs. To keep it sleeping, the people offer a soul, young, pure, and marked. The child must be buried in silence, wrapped in the desert's breath. If the god accepts, the land stays calm. If the soul escapes, the god awakens. Davin stared at the words. They had buried Valia as a gift to something old, something ancient. But now she was awake, and that meant the deal was broken. That night, Valia cried in her sleep. She gripped the bed tightly, her body shaking. The glowing marks turned red. The walls of the ship vibrated just slightly, like something was whispering through metal. Davin held her shoulders gently. "You're okay. You're safe." But outside, the desert did not sleep, and somewhere beneath the sand, something ancient opened its eyes. She opens her eyes, and screams. Valia opened her eyes slowly. This time she did not cry. She stared at the ceiling of the human's ship, breathing softly. Her arms crossed over her chest like she was still buried beneath sand. The room was quiet, but she could feel something far away, calling to her, calling her back. The strange symbols on her skin had changed color. They were no longer black or red. Now they glowed a dim golden light, like fire trapped beneath her skin. Davin stood nearby, watching her silently. He hadn't slept in 2 days. "You're awake," he said gently. Valia sat up fast. Her eyes locked onto him, and then she screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It was sharp and loud, but not with fear. It was a warning that something was near, something that wanted her back. Davin raised his hands. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." But Valia wasn't looking at him. She was looking past him, through the wall, into the desert. She whispered in her alien tongue, her voice trembling. "It knows I'm still alive." Davin frowned. "Who knows?" She placed her hand on the glowing mark on her arm and replied with one word. "The sleeper." That afternoon, Davin checked the sensors outside his ship. The sand around the ship was shifting slowly, like small waves were rolling under the surface. The desert was moving. He opened his log and typed quickly. "Subject Valia is awake. She claims something called the sleeper is aware of her presence. Possible connection between her ritual markings and underground movement. The girl may be mentally linked to a buried entity." He paused, then added, "I believe I may have broken an ancient seal." He looked out the window, and the desert stared back. Inside the ship, Valia was trying to speak. Davin gave her food and a translation tablet. She tapped it slowly, piecing words together. "You not leave me?" "No," Davin said. "I won't leave you." She looked down. "They gave me to the ground. I know. They said I would become quiet forever." Davin clenched his jaw. "Not anymore. I pulled you out." Valia looked into his eyes. "Then now, it wants you too." That night, the sand howled, not the wind, the sand itself. Davin looked out and saw something terrifying. The ground was splitting, not deep, not wide, but small cracks like veins were opening across the dunes, as if the desert was bleeding. Then came the sound, a long, low hum that seemed to vibrate the bones in his chest. Valia stood behind him, shaking. "It's waking," she whispered. "Because I'm not buried." Davin turned to her. "Why you? Why did they choose you?" She closed her eyes. "Because my blood is old. My voice matches the first songs. I was born on a night with 2 moons. The temple said my soul would feed the sleeper for 100 years. Davin felt sick. She wasn't just a sacrifice. She was chosen. He stepped forward. "I don't care what they said. You're not going back there." Suddenly her marks flared, glowing bright and hot. She screamed again and dropped to her knees. A strange force burst through the ship like a pulse, making the lights flicker. Davin rushed to her. "Stay with me, Valia. Stay. Awake." She looked up at him with tears in her glowing eyes. "It's not going to let me go." In that moment, Davin made a choice. He wouldn't just protect her. He would fight whatever came for her, even if it meant facing the gods, even if it meant going back into the cursed land where she had been buried. Because no child should be left in the dark, alone, and no monster would take her again. The sacrifice that failed. Davin stood at the edge of the whispering sand again. This time, he wasn't just exploring, he was trespassing. His ship was hidden behind a rock ridge, and Valia remained inside, resting. He had given her a signal device and strict instructions. If anything strange happened, call him. But deep down, he knew something strange was already happening. The village nearby was quiet. Too quiet. No people on the paths. No sound of children. Only smoke rising from the center square. And silence. Davin moved carefully, hiding in the shadows. He wore a desert cloak, his hood low. The village was old, made of stone and clay, built at the edge of the cursed sands. Every building looked tired, as if even the walls remembered secrets they wanted to forget. Then he heard them. Whispers. Not from ghosts. From people. Inside the meeting hall. He slipped closer and crouched behind the wall. Voices spoke in the Eauri alien tongue, but he used his translator device to listen. "She was taken," said one voice. "The sacrifice is undone." "The sleeper will awaken," said another. "The ground trembled last night. The pact is broken." One elder slammed his hand on the table. "Find the human who took her. The girl must return to the sand." Davin's heart pounded. They knew. They knew Valea was still alive. He moved quickly, away from the hall and toward the temple ruins nearby. Half buried in sand, the ancient temple looked like it had been swallowed by time. Symbols marked the cracked stones, the same as the ones on Valea's skin. Inside, the air was dry and heavy. Davin found an altar. It was blackened with old ash. Chains hung from the corners, small and rusted. A shallow pit had been dug in the middle, just deep enough to hold a small body. He swallowed hard. This was where they had done it, where they had prepared her. He found a scroll tucked in a stone crevice. He scanned it and read the translation on his pad. The first sleeper was born in fire. It fed on the dreams of the living. Once every 10 cycles it must be fed again. A child, pure and chosen. Bury her under the moon's light. If she wakes, we all burn. Davin felt cold. The desert wasn't cursed by nature. It was cursed by design. Back in the ship, Valea gasped and clutched her arms. The symbols on her skin flickered like lightning under her skin. She could feel Davin getting closer to the temple. She could feel it watching. The sleeper wasn't a god, it was a creature, and it was hungry. Davin returned quickly as the sun set. He ran through the sand, breathing hard. He entered the ship and sealed the door. Valea looked at him with wide eyes. "You went back." He nodded. "I had to know." Her hands shook. "They won't stop. They'll try to return me. They believe, if I'm not buried again, the sleeper will come." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do you believe it?" She was quiet, then whispered, "Yes." Davin's voice was firm. "Then we stop it. Together." She looked at him, confused. "You're not one of us, why help?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Because no one helped you." That night, Davin placed scanners in the sand. He connected his ship systems to deep ground sensors and seismic readers. The data coming in wasn't good. Something was moving under the surface. Not an earthquake, a pattern, a heartbeat. The sleeper was real, and it was rising. Davin stared at the glowing lines on Valea's arms. They weren't just marks. They were alive, like veins connected to something deep beneath the earth. He sat beside her. "What happens if it wakes?" She looked down. "It will take me back. And if I don't let it, it will take you too." Davin didn't flinch. "Then we make sure it doesn't wake." She looked at him with something new in her eyes. Hope. Outside, the first crack split across the sand, a long, dark line, and beneath it, something ancient opened its mouth and waited. "The monster wakes up," it began, with the wind stopping. No breeze, no sound, no movement. The air hung heavy around Davin's ship, thick like smoke, though nothing burned. Valea sat on the floor, hugging her knees, eyes wide and unblinking. Her skin glowed faint gold, but the marks along her arms now flickered like fireflies trapped in a storm. Then the ground breathed. A slow, low rumble spread across the sand. Not like a quake, and more like something stretching, rising, waking. Valea whispered, "It's coming." Davin looked out the ship's window. In the distance, the sand rose into strange shapes, as if something was crawling just beneath the surface, forming waves. The scanners screamed warnings. "Unnatural seismic pattern, subsurface mass detected, depth 50 meters, rising fast." He turned to Valea. "We need to move." She shook her head slowly. "You don't understand, we can't run from it." Davin crouched beside her. Then tell me what it is. What does it want? She looked into his eyes. It wants me, and it wants you too. Because you broke the rule, you pulled me out. Davin checked the power cells on his weapons. They were charged. He slipped on his armor and picked up a sonic pulse rifle. Experimental tech meant for mining, not monsters. But it was the only thing he had. Outside, the wind returned, but it didn't howl, it moaned. Like the voices of 1,000 buried souls rising with the sand. Suddenly, the ground near the ship exploded. A massive black shape tore through the surface like a beast tearing from its cage. Sand flew into the air like a volcano erupting. Davin raised his arm to shield his face. From the smoke it rose. The sleeper. It wasn't just a creature. It was a mountain with eyes. Its skin was layered stone and bone. Long tendrils of black, sand dripped from its body and its mouth glowed from within, pulsing orange like lava. Its eyes locked onto the ship. Valea screamed. Her marks burned red now. The monster had found her. Davin activated the ship's defense grid. A bright blue shield surrounded them. The creature slammed into it once and the impact shook everything. Alarms rang out. Shield integrity, 72%. The creature didn't roar. It whispered. A deep, growling voice entered Davin's ears like poison. Return. The gift. Davin gritted his teeth. She's not a gift, she's a child. Valea grabbed his arm, her eyes wild. It speaks in your mind now. It knows you. He turned to her. Then let it listen. He opened the top hatch and climbed. Up, standing between Valea and the ancient beast. The air felt heavy like it hated him for standing there. I won't give her back, Davin shouted. I'll bury you deeper than you've ever been. The monster raised a massive limb, a mix of bone, ash, and writhing earth. It struck. The ship's shield crackled. Shield integrity, 38%. Davin aimed his sonic rifle and fired. A bright shockwave slammed into the creature's face, tearing some of the sand skin away. It staggered back and let out a groan that echoed across the sky. Valea climbed beside him, her hand glowing brighter than ever. The marks on her skin pulsed like a star. She was marked to be a door, Davin realized. You were never meant to die. You were meant to open something. She nodded slowly. I'm the key, but you dug me up. Too soon. The monster charged again. Davin pressed a button on his belt. A trap opened under the sand, one he built from mining charges. The creature stepped right into it. He detonated. A huge boom sent rocks flying. The monster screamed for the first time. Its chest cracked open. Inside was a pit of glowing, pulsing light. A prison, a doorway, and Valea was supposed to unlock it. Davin held her hand tightly. I know what we have to do. She looked scared. You'll die. He smiled, eyes fierce. Only if I let go. He handed her a small device. A shock disruptor. You're the key. This time you choose. Lock it forever. Valea stepped forward, raising her hand toward the glowing chest. The monster growled, sensing betrayal. She pressed the device against her own glowing mark. A flash of light exploded from her body, brighter than the sun. The monster screamed, fell backward, and crashed into the sand. The earth closed around it like a coffin, silent again. Sleeping again. Maybe forever. Valea collapsed. Davin caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up at him and smiled weakly. I'm still here. He nodded. You are, and no one's burying you again. The human who stood in the way Davin didn't sleep that night. He sat beside Valea's bed, watching her chest rise and fall slowly. The glow in her skin had faded, the marks no longer burned. She looked peaceful, but empty, drained. The sleeper was buried again. For now. But Davin knew what he saw inside that creature's chest. That wasn't the end. It was a door. And Valea had closed it only halfway. By morning, the local villagers had come. They did not knock. They stood outside the ship in silence, cloaked in gray robes, their faces hidden. There were no weapons in their hands. But there was no fear. In their eyes either. They came not to fight, but to take her back. Davin stepped out, armor on, pulse rifle ready. He stood between them and the ship's door. An elder stepped forward. "You broke the balance," he said. "The sleeper is still restless. The girl must be returned. The sacrifice must be completed." Davin's voice was cold. "She is not yours anymore. You buried her like trash. I pulled her back. She is chosen by the earth. She is the bridge. If she does not return, more will die." Davin didn't move. "Then I'll stand in the way of death itself." The villagers didn't attack. They simply stood there waiting, whispering words in their dead language, hoping the sleeper would rise again and finish what it started. Inside the ship, Valea woke slowly. She saw Davin standing at the door, unmoved, fearless. She felt something stir inside her. Not pain, not fear, strength. She stepped outside. The villagers gasped. The markings on her arms were faded now, soft like scars. She looked at them, then at the people who once threw her into the sand. "I was a child," she said in her tongue. "You buried me alive. You were chosen," the elder shouted. "We gave you to save us." She looked to Davin, then back, to them. "Then why did the sleeper try to kill all of us?" she asked. "If it only wanted me?" Silence. Davin turned to her. "You don't have to explain anything. You owe them nothing." She stepped closer to the villagers. They stepped back. "I am no longer yours," she said, "and I will not die for your fear." The villagers left. They didn't fight. They simply walked back into the sand, whispering prayers to a god that had already turned its back on them. Later that day, Davin repaired the ship's shields and made preparations to leave the region. But something still felt wrong. The earth hadn't shaken again, but there was pressure, as if the air itself was holding its breath. He checked the ground sensors. Subsurface movement, minimal. But a second signal flashed. Residual. Energy signature detected him inside Valea. He turned to see her sitting by the window, staring at the desert. "Something's still inside you," he said carefully. She nodded. "It didn't want to let go. You held it back." "I closed the door," she whispered. "But it left. Something behind to find me later." Davin clenched his fists. "Then I'll protect you until my last breath." She looked up at him. "Why?" "You could have left. You should have." He walked over, sat beside her. "Because the moment I heard your voice under the sand, I knew you were worth saving." She smiled, truly smiled, for the first time. Outside, the desert wind returned. It blew softly across the cursed land. But this time, the sand didn't whisper. It listened. Because the sleeper had met something new. Not another sacrifice, but a human who refused to kneel. The girl who lived again. The stars above the desert were bright tonight, peaceful. But for Valea, peace was still hard to believe. She stood outside the ship, barefoot in the cool sand, looking up. The same sand that once tried to swallow her, now held no power over her. She was no longer the buried girl, no longer a frightened offering. She was alive. And for the first time in her life, she had chosen to live. Inside, Davin was preparing the ship for departure. Their time on this cursed world was over. He checked the logs, shut down external scanners, and turned off the security grid. But his eyes kept drifting toward her silhouette outside. She had grown stronger in just a few days, and she wasn't the only one who had changed. Valea came back in quietly, sitting across from him. She was wearing a new suit, one that Davin gave her, clean, soft, warm. Nothing like the torn rags she'd been buried in. "You still think it will come back?" she asked. Davin nodded. "Not soon, but someday, it might." She placed her hand on her chest. "I can still feel it, like an echo." Davin leaned forward. "Then we don't run, we prepare. Together." She looked at him, her voice small. I don't know how to be normal. You were never normal, he said, with a smirk. You're stronger than most people I've ever met. She blinked. Even for a human? He laughed. Especially for a human. She smiled again, that quiet smile she only gave him. As the engines warmed, Davin made a final scan of the region. The underground monster, the sleeper, was silent. But its energy signature had faded deeper into the planet's core, buried once more, and locked by the one it tried to consume. Before they left, Valia did one last thing. She returned to the edge of the place she had been buried, the pit where she had once begged for breath. She stood there quietly, hands at her sides. Then she bent down, scooped up a handful of sand, and let it fall through her fingers. No more fear, she whispered, then turned her back on it forever. The ship lifted into the sky, leaving the cursed sands behind. Through the window, Valia watched the ground grow smaller and smaller. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her heart no longer belonged to the past. She was no longer a sacrifice. She was someone new, someone free. Later, as stars filled the windows and the desert planet faded behind them, Valia asked Davin, "Where will we go now?" He smiled. "Anywhere you want. I've never wanted anything before," she said. "You can start now," he replied. She looked down for a moment, thinking, then said softly, "Somewhere with flowers." Davin raised an eyebrow. "Flowers?" She nodded. "I saw them in one of your pictures. I want to walk on soft grass, not sand. I want to feel something alive under my feet." Davin grinned. "Then flowers it is." The ship moved into light speed, leaving the darkness behind. The sleeper would sleep again, but even if it returned, it would not face a helpless girl. It would face a survivor, and the human who had dug her from death itself. She was once a sacrifice. Now she was a fighter, a child buried to die. Now a girl who lived again,